What is derivative path?
Derivative path has been around now. We're close to being 11 years old. So a lot of the founders of the firm I used to work with at my former shop, Wells Fargo, and they branched out because they determined there was with Volcker and with some Dodd-Frank rules, a lot of the financial institutions were hamstrung with some of the services that they could provide, and they saw a lot of opportunity in the space and wanted to jump into the capital markets, interest rate hedging primarily, and offer not only the solutions to book them, but the consultative and the ability to tap into expertise as needed. So they built a platform that's cloud-based that allows the users to not only do the interest rate hedging work, but also expanded it into FX and now into commodities as well. Most of those customers, and there's about over 200 of them now, they're financial institutions, generally under 100 billion in assets. So they have some element of capital markets presence, but they don't have a full-scale shop. And so they're leveraging our tech and our expertise to allow them to provide those solutions to their customers, especially their more valued customers at the banks. So it's a little bit about derivative path. Jumping a bit into how it relates to myself is that in building out the specs and the strategy for the FX hedging risk management program, they realized that a lot of the banks weren't interested unless the payments piece came along with it. And so I'm not sure how much you know about it, John, but generally speaking, at least where I sit, a lot of the opportunities for hedging, for risk mitigation for a bank in the FX space is actually coming from regular, recurring, and even episodic flows on the payment side. So to be able to bring that into our platform, and we have one trade blotter for everything. So it doesn't matter if it's interest rates, commodities, FX payments, or FX hedging. It's one place where the capital markets folks can see the entirety of the experience, not only from the firm view, but also from their customer view. And so to extend into deeper payments opportunities, which is now getting more into the treasury and operational sides of the bank, that was a interest for the firm. And so they brought me in to help manage that because at Wells Fargo, I was there for 25 years. This is the space that I played, is taking, the core technology that the bank had built out and extended it. It didn't matter if it was to Wells Fargo customers or outside via APIs, to banks and to institutionals. And so they brought me on, and I've been building this out, and we're just starting to launch right now.
What does the international payment space look like today?
I'd say it's becoming more fragmented over time, as opposed to coalescing under the SWIFT sort of payment network. There's a lot of disruption, as there is with a lot of financial technology, and that disruption extends into the cross-border payment rails. And to me, it's absolutely fascinating to see, MasterCard leveraging their rails. Certainly, obviously, we have like an older player like American Express, who's been doing it for years. But now we have Ripple and sort of broad, true fintech startups who are developing their own payment capabilities. There's also a lot of investment intra-country to build out a real-time payments network. So we have FedNow and our TP here in the States, and a lot of efforts throughout the world to sort of replace wires as the standard, domestic settlement tool into something that's much more just in time. And so there's a lot of investment in this. There's moves to move to greater enriched product and transaction message sets via ISO 20022. That is starting to disrupt. So there's a lot of things happening, and there is no one way to proceed. There's a lot of true believers out there with visions of what that, where we'll be in 5 or 10 years, and trying to navigate through that for our strategy is very interesting. And I'll just say, my view is that I am open to a lot of the swift alternative ways of moving money across the globe, but only a few of those are actually going to survive.
What are the trends in foreign currency?
In December, when folks are putting out their trends for 2024, they're saying the dollar is going to weaken, because we're going to be raising rates, or excuse me, we're going to be lowering rates, the Fed, and there'll be an outflow of folks can't make as much returns on investments here in the States, so they're going to take that money elsewhere. That hasn't really happened. Inflation has been perhaps a bit more reluctant to want to be tamed, as a lot of the prognosticators thought. So we're in basically this holding pattern where some of the inflation numbers look better and look worse. There's the macro sort of impact of this, which generally is more positive, and then there's the more micro sort of man or woman on the street impact, and it is not very good for them. And so oftentimes the macro will win out, but because this is an election year, and it's going to be, as we all know, a very heated election, the inflation piece, how people feel about the economy, is such a predictor of how they vote. And so I do feel like the Fed and others, even though they are, politically agnostic, they will be paying more attention to that impact of the individual. But for the macro piece, we're expecting movements in the dollar weakening, and I'd say it's been soft, and it's going to continue to be soft for the next 2 to 3 months. And then, we're going to see what impact as the nominees get nominated. The other piece too, completely off of what I mentioned before, that I'm fascinated about, is on the equity side, the move to T+1 to settle at the end of May for the U.S. equities. And Europe and Asia are not able to follow suit at this time. So on paper, that's an advantage for U.S. flows. Get access to the money faster, less need for credit lines or smaller credit lines. You can put that capital elsewhere. So if that all happens the way it should on paper, we could see more inflows into the States, and then we could see the dollar actually strengthening. So there's a few things that are happening here that will be interesting to follow for the next 2 to 4 months.
Do you see any trends in FX hedging?
Basic principle protection, because there's some quarters like going into Japan where it's much more likely that the dollar the dollar will continue to strengthen versus JPY, but in other currencies it's just not as clear. And so folks are looking, do I hedge or not? And I'm seeing more folks willing to sort of sit on the sides who would normally engage in some sort of hedging activity. So I don't think there's enough to say there's a full-blown trend, but there's certainly more of it than what I personally would see. As we get into the summer and we get into the political conventions and sort of we move away from the primary world and into the general election world, then we're going to hear, we kind of know where Biden's platform is, and we kind of know where Trump's platform is. We don't know if someone like an RFK is going to make any true headroom. He's just going to be a disruptor. But all signs point to the folks being so critically aware of this. And also, just a side comment, after 2016, the markets, they priced in a certain outcome or expected outcome with the Trump victory, and it didn't actually occur. So I think that there was a lot of learnings that came out of the expectation versus the reality for him that I think will be very instructive for this go around if you're looking to hedge a Trump win.
How was business for Derivative Path in 2023?
2023 was record revenue for us, mostly due to the post Silicon Valley sort of challenges. And as you know, one of the more technical pieces of where the bank was is that they didn't really hedge properly as interest rates rose. And so that sort of playbook hit a lot of our customers to the treasurer and CFO desks. And so there was a lot more interest in understanding this and understanding different options, and also a lot more actual execution of those options. So we now have a new normal, I would say. Say by May, June of last year, all the folks who were going to move in that direction who hadn't really done it, or at least to the level that they ended up doing to has sort of flattened out. And so we expect that sort of model to continue. I didn't really understand the term disrupt at the time, but in the early 2000s, we actually had an API, and we came in at Wells Fargo and replaced essentially faxed static rate sheets that the incumbents were using to support their downstream correspondent FX business. And we were able to provide live rates through APIs. And so that was unheard of at the time. So over a period of, say, 5 years, we were able to help transform. And then other folks joined in as well. So it wasn't just Wells. And so, in my opinion, there hasn't been much investment in this space since that time, as far as bank initiated payments. There's plenty of disruption in the FX payment space, period. With the Revoluts and the Zoom, et cetera, of the world, but not in what the banks were investing in. So part of the opportunity here is to modernize through some technology that we have. To the comments I made about the founders' derivative path in 2012, 2013, they were hamstrung. A lot of these banks are sort of hamstrung in terms of the ability to support the what's the right term? The way the configurations that a downstream bank's customer would use, they are not allowed to touch that space, but derivative path can. So we are figuring out ways of taking what was built, that I helped build, but certainly is more than just me, 20 years ago, and we're now giving it a facelift. We're getting into the digital space. We're now putting it into that trade blotter that I mentioned on our cloud platform, so that you have a data lake of just rich information. So there's a lot of opportunity, but as you probably know, the sales cycle, it takes a while for banks to move and to commit. And there's a lot of capital intensive projects, RTP and FedNow, I mentioned a few minutes ago, and some other ones that they have to invest in. So we're coming in with a lighter tech lift in order to be able to offer these solutions to their customers. And so it's very interesting. It's very early days. It's very, very reminiscent of 2003, 2004 for me. And it's interesting that I have the potential to disrupt something that I myself was involved in disrupting 20 years ago. So I believe in it, but I also recognize it's a tremendous amount of